6, as we called it. Like the F-101 Voodoo, flown by about half the air defense squadrons, the 6 was designed to get off the ground fast, climb fast, and cruise fast, so it could intercept and destroy those bombers at any altitude in any weather, far north over Canada. Ground Control Intercept, or GCI, radar sites, and Semi-Automatic Ground Environment, or SAGE sectors, directed the fighters to a position where they could take over the attack with their sophisticated MA-1 fire control system. A typical scenario went something like this. Each squadron had at least 2 fighters on 5-minute alert, meaning they could scramble and be climbing toward any threat within 5 minutes after the raucous scramble horn sounded. Actual times for the Red Bulls averaged around 2.5 minutes. The 5-minute alert birds were armed with radar-guided and heat-seeking missiles. Backing them up were several aircraft on 15-minute status, armed with the same missiles, plus nuclear MB-1 air-to-air rockets. These big white blivets, as we called them, were designed to be fired ahead of an enemy bomber, where they would detonate, causing a huge fireball that would virtually evaporate the threat. Backing the 15-minute birds were several 1-hour birds, also nuclear-armed. The rationale behind the system was based on time and distance. If the Soviets, we usually called them Russians, attacked, they would come the shortest distance. That was over the Arctic Ocean. They'd be detected by our radars somewhere in northern Canada or Alaska. GCI or SAGE would scramble the 5-minute birds to hustle out to positively identify the intruding aircraft and shoot them down. If the Russians launched intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, at us over the North Pole, some very basic math told us we'd have about 15 minutes to react after the missiles were detected. We'd launch everything that would fly and disperse to non-target airfields. The problem in October 1962 was that it appeared that the Soviets were playing a trump card. Rumors were spreading that they were bringing weapons into Cuba. That would change everything. The flight time of their bombers or missiles would be a tiny fraction of what we were set up to counter, and they'd be coming from the wrong way. Most of our defenses were aimed north. We would be sitting ducks. They could streak across the Caribbean, literally on the wave tops, where the radars of the time were nearly worthless. They'd be on top of targets like Miami and Homestead Air Force Base or a host of others before even the 5-minute birds could get to them. If they brought in missiles, their flight time from Cuba to the east and southeast coasts would be so short that our first indication of an attack could be a nuclear detonation on an American city. It was a nervous time. At the 11th, we got wind of this in early October. All leaves were canceled, and calls went out to everyone already on leave or on temporary duty away from the squadron to return at once. We put more 6s on 5-minute alert and loaded every other flyable aircraft with nuclear MB-1s. Security was incredibly tight. At one point, the alert hangars were full and about a dozen 106s were parked on the ramp armed with nukes. Security police were everywhere. As with any nuclear situation, no single individual could get near this area. Everything was done on a 2-man concept. Even with all the clearances, badges, and background checks, no unaccompanied person could get near those birds without risking being shot. Suddenly, we heard the unmistakable drone of a World War II vintage P-51 Mustang. A lone propeller-driven fighter was entering our traffic pattern at high speed. Its wings bore faded British or Canadian bullseye insignia. The old warbird rolled into an 80-degree right bank over the end of the runway. Its pilot flew a tight, close-in pattern as we watched in disbelief. Cop cars took off like a covey of quail toward the runway. This guy was going to land. He touched down smoothly, with only a puff of white smoke from each tire announcing that he was on the ground. Police vehicles turned onto the runway from every taxiway, but they kept their distance from that huge whirling prop. With 50 or so muzzles pointing at him, the Mustang pilot taxied toward our ramp. The cops were frantic. About 100 yards from the nearest 106, they got him corralled and forced him to stop. His canopy opened slowly. From a tiny cavity behind the pilot's seat, an orange